go is obviously extremely rave influenced, in my eyes, and you tell me if it's not for you. But where were you hearing that in America to kind of be influenced by that, or were you listening
Oh,
to it? It feels very UK to me.
yeah. I mean, it was record stores. I mean, Vinyl Mania, dance tracks. I mean, I started DJing in the mid 80s and I just would spend all my money on records.
Yeah.
And so you'd go to record stores and not really, because I didn't have access to like the music press. You only had access to record stores and other nightclubs.
Yeah.
And at that time, I didn't know the difference between house music and techno. This is 1988.
Yeah.
And so when you heard Inner City, Good Life, I was like, someone would say, oh, that's a techno track. I was like, but it's a house track.
Yeah.
Or Strings of Life by Derek May. I'd be like, well, this is house music. And someone would say, no, actually, it's from Detroit. It's techno. It's like, okay, I don't really know what that means, but sure. And then by about 1990, I just started having more access to music magazines.
Okay.
And to other DJs and this community. I mean, this was before the internet, so it was all word of mouth. And we just started slowly finding out about these different genres. And then, 1990, I'm trying to think, it was like the beginning of, we'll call it like the divergence of the BPMs.
Yeah.
And what I mean, you'll understand this perfectly. Most people listening will understand perfectly that up until about 1990, house music and techno were roughly the same speed. Like house music was 122 beats per minute, techno was 124. So you could very easily go from Marshall Jefferson house music anthem into an inner city track.
Yeah.
And then Belgian techno happened, RNS records, and suddenly got faster. And then breakbeats started happening, and rave music just kept getting faster and faster and faster and faster. And house music was still wonderful, but it became even slower. It became more like garage, like 120 beats per minute, 119. And I loved everything, but at that point, you could no longer play both types of music in a night. Like you couldn't go to state and I'm stating the obvious to you and most people listening, you can't really play 134 BPM Belgian techno track and then go to 118 BPM deep house track.
No, 100%.
So you can love both of them, but you could no longer as a DJ play both in the same night.
But this is where it kind of, for me, it amazes me how you've kind of curated your career, because you're known for rave, for that rave kind of techno, in my eyes, okay? And in my opinion, but you also have your electronica, you have your ambient projects, you have beautiful piano pieces. And realistically, you're very aware, but in this industry, in the electronic music industry, it feels like people are pigeonholed into one genre and that's all they do. And they don't step out of the kind of the realm of making anything else or releasing anything else under their artist. We all make stuff, right? But a lot of the time we are, okay, I'm a techno artist, I release just techno. How did you kind of build yourself as an artist where you were actually more of an artist, not a DJ producer, if that makes sense?
Well, a part of it was just my weird background of like, when I was very, very young, I studied classical music and music theory.
Yeah.
And then that segued into punk rock and new wave, and that segued into hip hop, and that segued into electronic music. And I just had such deep love for all of these genres. And also a lot of my heroes at the time experimented wildly. I mean, you think of like The Clash, like Joe Strummer was in a punk rock band, but they played reggae, they played hip hop, they did so many different things. David Bowie, same thing. John Lennon, there was just this sense of, I was like, okay, my heroes are experimenting.
Yeah.
And I'm hanging out in New York and I'm going to Danceteria where the hip hop DJ is on one floor and the gay disco is above that and the punk rock band's in the basement. That eclecticism just seemed so interesting. So when I started making records under my own name, yeah, there was quite a lot of pressure to just do one thing.
Yeah.
From, you know, the people I worked with, etc. Definitely, I was not encouraged to be so weird,
Yeah.
and so confusing. It's kind of amazing to me that I wasn't dropped from more record labels, or, you know, because, yeah, I mean, like when I made the album Animal Rights, which is this weird industrial punk rock record, Daniel Miller, who owned Mute Records, to his credit, he didn't like it.
Yeah.
He didn't want me to release it, but he supported me in releasing it. And he said, you know what? Okay, if this is what you have to do, this is what you have to do. And I just thought it was part of the job description that, like, artists, musicians are supposed to experiment and supposed to try different things. And it's only in hindsight that I've realized that the smart musicians pick one thing and stick with it. You know, Metallica became a heavy metal band in the early 80s. They've never not been a heavy metal band. And boy, oh boy, look at how it's served their career. You know, and then, sorry, I'm rambling on like a crazy person, but then I look at a band like the Chemical Brothers.
Yeah.
And what they've done that's so clever is they've experimented, like they've incorporated so many different musical elements in what they do, but always within the realm of electronic dance music, which is kudos to them for figuring out how to both experiment but never confuse people.
Yeah, because I you hit the nail on the head, but there's also something very romantic about a Moby album dropping and me going to listen and not having a fucking clue what's going to be on this album. And there's something beautiful about that. And I think that's what you've created as an artist. Whereas the Chemical Brothers are, again, one of the reasons why I do what I do. However, I know exactly what I'm going to get with a Chemical Brother album. And I don't know I don't know. There's no right or wrongs.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is I wish I could give myself a little bit more credit for having a clue what I was doing.
Yeah.
Like there was no, you know, for example, like when the album Play became successful, I would do interviews and people would ask me about the strategy. It's like, I don't know. I made this record in my bedroom and people liked it. Like there was no strategy. So that eclecticism that you're referring to, it was just the product of enthusiastic cluelessness on my part. Like it wasn't, you know, there's no career plan, there's no strategy. It's just simply, I don't know, almost like a clueless dim-wittedness on my part. Like, hey, I want to make a punk rock record. And the people around me saying, you know, that's going to alienate everybody who listens to your music. I was like, yeah, okay, so I'll do it anyway. Like it's honestly, like one could say, like, I love the fact that I've been able to experiment this much and be so eclectic, but it definitely at times has veered into the realm of the clueless and stupid.
And that kind of links back to the punk era, right? That links back to being more of a punk artist than, because punk is more so about just doing what you want to do and being part of the culture rather than being commercial to a certain extent.
Yeah, and the ethos of challenge.
Yeah.
You know, pushing, like, and I'm not saying I'm good at anything, and I'm not saying I did this effectively, but, you know, the 20th century was filled, and going back even further, but especially the 20th century, the most interesting artistic movements were confrontational.
Agreed.
You know, whether it was, you know, the Situationists or Fluxus or Dada or the Surrealists or the Minimalists, like there's always been, even whether it's John Coltrane or Public Enemy, there's this idea of you love your audience, but you challenge your audience and you confront the audience, and sometimes you succeed and sometimes you fail. And I just thought that's so interesting. Like, you know, especially like the Situationists or the Dadaists. And I guess what always seemed a little sad to me in a way, and especially now, I think sadly it's even more true, is like, and I don't want to judge, I don't want to criticize, but like when people's first criteria for evaluating their possible creative expression is how does it affect their career?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I understand. And I recognize I come from a place of privilege, so my opinion doesn't mean that much there, but I just feel like when career comes before creativity, the results tend to be a little more anemic.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it becomes just very more catered to commercialism, and it's very. It's also easy for all of us to sit back on our high horses because we have successful careers in music, but it can be very easily manipulated to create something that sells well to a certain extent,
Yeah.
and creates a career. However, you're a classic example that by doing what you absolutely love can create one of the most influential albums in electronic music. And I think there's that level of being able to be free as an artist. Do you think you can get that nowadays?
I would hope so. I mean, again, I don't trust my opinion on a lot of things because, you know, like I'm a 58-year-old guy who's had a degree of success. So like, it's kind of like if someone asks me what I think about Taylor Swift, I'm like, you know what, I'm not the demographic for that. Like, don't listen to me. Someone asked me what I thought about the Barbie movie, and I was like, why would you ask a 58-year-old guy's opinion about that? Like, I'm not the demographic. Like, so it's again, to your point, it's very easy for me to sit back and say, oh, everyone should, you know, pursue the creative muse and disregard, you know, commerce. I'm like, yeah, but I don't trust my opinion about that because other people, you know, people have to pay the rent. People have to, you know, they have sick in-laws. They have to pay off college debt. They're like, so what I will say, and I can be a little judgmental, so I apologize for being judgmental, is like, what I don't understand are the people who compromise when they don't have to.
Yeah.
You know, like the wealthy musicians who just keep protecting their career when they don't need to. It's like, go out and like use your platform to address politics, to address social issues, to address environmental issues, like experiment creatively. You know, like when I see musicians who are worth $100 million being cautious, I'm like, no, that's not the time to be cautious. That's the time to go out into the world and use your platform and your status and your resources to make the world a better, more interesting place. And that's when I'm like, I kind of roll my eyes when I watch something like the Grammys and I see these wealthy musicians being safe. I'm like, come on. Like once you have a degree of financial security and once you have a little bit of a career under your belt, go out and do something interesting with it.
And did you?
Again,
no, I don't.
That's where I can get a little judgmental.
I don't disagree with you. I think as long as an artist is being their authentic self, I think that's the thing. Is you don't have to be political. You don't have to be spiritual. You don't have to be any of these things. But if you believe in something, talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm not saying that like it's a one size fits all approach towards like activism and creativity, but you know, we just know whether it's a politician, whether it's an artist, whether it's a musician, whether it's a whatever, we know when people are being cautious and prioritizing safety and career over authenticity.
Yeah.
You know, and we just know, like everybody knows, and and selfishly, it makes me kind of depressed because the world doesn't need safe, wealthy musicians protecting their careers. The world needs people experimenting and challenging and using their platforms to do great things. So again, I'm being very judgmental and I apologize, but it really galls me. I guess it's that question, like the deathbed question. Like when someone's on
Yeah.
their deathbed, what do they want to remember? Do they want to remember being safe? Do they want to remember, you know, like protecting a career so they could buy a fourth house and a private plane? Yeah. Or do they want to remember trying new things and trying to address issues that are important to them in a public sphere? Like, at least that's just my perspective.